Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for Rivage at Acton. So just want to give you some information on the property and talk a little bit about the 58 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at the property. So the purpose of this session is to give you that information, but also talk about the eligibility and lottery processes and what to expect after the lottery is run. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat function in Zoom, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. You were muted when you came into the room just to minimize any outside noise. This is a live recording. It's being recorded so that we can post it to our YouTube channel for anyone who's interested in the property that wasn't able to attend tonight. And if you have any questions after tonight, if you didn't think of it, but you do have some questions about the property for us, you can reach SEB Housing by emailing info@sebhousing.com, or you can give us a call. Our phone number is listed on your screen now as well at 617-782-6900. So just for some background information on who we are, so SEB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team for the building. We've been hired by the developer to market the affordable properties. We're also going to conduct this information session, obviously. We're going to collect and review applications to determine a household's eligibility for the affordable housing program, and we'll eventually run the lottery as well. So in the initial phases, SEB Housing is your main point of contact rather than the management office, but further along in the process, the on-site management team at Rivage would be your main point of contact. And so there's a few steps in this process. The first being to apply for the lottery and to qualify for the affordable housing program based off of that lottery application that you submit. I'll talk more about the application in just a second. If you are found to be eligible, you will be entered into the lottery. The second step in the process is if your waiting list position after the lottery, the waiting lists are created after the lottery. If you're high enough, if your position is high enough on the waiting list, you'll be put in contact with the leasing office over at Rivage to do their lease eligibility screening, which is separate from the screenings at SEB Housing. It might include credit check, rental history check, background check, the sort of thing that you might expect from any property owner who is looking for or screening tenants. If you're found to be lease eligible, you then reserve one of the affordable apartments, and you're sent back over to SEB Housing to complete a program certification with us. So that's the point in the process where you would need to submit pay stubs, supporting documentation for taxes and bank accounts and things like that. Because to apply for this lottery, you don't need to submit that documentation. You just need to submit a lottery application where you're self-reporting what your income is on the application. So you're listing the occupants of your household, you're listing any jobs you have, any income coming into the household, and all of that. But it won't be until later on in the process that you are asked to confirm it for us with verification, like pay stubs and such. So if you haven't already and you're interested in this opportunity, we encourage you to go to SEB Housing's website. So if you go to sebhousing.com and you click on I want to rent, since this is a rental opportunity, and you select Rivage at Acton, you'll be taken to a page that is specific to this property. It's going to have a downloadable version of the application. It's also going to have a jot form link, which is this link here, to get to the online version of the application, and it will have an information packet. A lot of the information in the information packet I'm going to go over tonight, but we still encourage anyone who's interested in the property to read that, because there's going to be some information in there that I'm not able to cover tonight. So we do encourage anyone who is interested in applying to fill out the online application. It is going to be the quickest way to apply and to assure that your application is received right away. Once you've submitted the online application, you're going to receive an instantaneous confirmation email, sort of like a bounce back email, that is just confirming that your application was received. And then later on, about 2 or 3, maybe 1, 2, 3 weeks after your application is submitted, you should get a more personalized email from SCB Housing confirming your lottery application number if you've been approved. So that first just kind of confirmation email is just an automatic reply. And if there's anything that's missing or if we have any questions, we'll let you know as well. If for any reason the online application is not an option for you, you can download the lottery application that is listed on our website, or you can request a paper application from us that we can mail to you. If you're completing the paper application, you can submit it to us in one of several ways, and those are explained on the first page of the application, but we have options to mail it to us, to fax it to us, to scan it to us as an attachment to an email. And we also have a physical office in Needham if you're in that area and want to drop it off. There's a drop box over there that's secure. And we encourage you to submit your lottery application early. It's fairly brief. Like I said, there's no supporting documentation that's needed. The application deadline is October 28th, so still almost a month left to apply. The 2 p.m. is the actual deadline, and the reason that it's specifically at 2 p.m. is because that JOT form link, so the online application, won't be active after 2 p.m. So if you plan on applying, make sure you do so by 2 p.m. that day online. And if you're sending it in, your application just needs to be postmarked by the deadline. And you don't need to be a resident of Acton to apply for this lottery. There are going to be some units that have local preference, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes, but you shouldn't be dissuaded from applying if you don't live within the town of Acton. So Rivage at Acton does have their own website as well, and it is rivageacton.com. And there's some additional information there, some floor plans, images of the property, things like that, that you can have a look at. It is expected that the first leases are going to be available sometime between December and early 2026. The management team does plan to pre-lease apartments beginning soon after the lottery in November. So there shouldn't be much of a delay with leasing up once you've completed the screening. So this is a brand new community. It's going to have a total of 230 rental apartments, and through this application process, the 58 affordable rental units will be leased to households that have incomes at or below 80% of the area median income that the federal government sets for the Boston-Acton area. So there's 2 buildings, and they're on the Assabet River. There are several community amenities, including a fitness center, outside pool, roof deck, business center, barbecue grilling area. And there is the West Concord MBTA station that is fairly close to the property as well. Tenants are going to pay, as you can see on your screen here, tenants are going to pay for gas, heat, and hot water, electric cooking, and electricity. Water and sewer charges are included in the rent, so you would not be responsible for those. As you can see here, so there's 24 one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartments. The rent will be $2,502 for those apartments. There's 28 two-bedroom, two-bath apartments, and the rent for those will be $2,784. There are 6 three-bedroom apartments with a rent of $3,081. Those affordable rent amounts are not set in accordance with an applicant's specific financial circumstances. So it means that the rents are not going to change if your income changes. So for this program, there is a formula that is used to calculate the rents, and it's based off of HUD, so the Housing and Urban Development Department's area median incomes for Boston, like I said. The rent could increase or change once per year. That's typically in the spring when HUD publishes their AMIs. So there would always be advance written notice. If you were to sign a lease in January, for example, of 2026, your rent cannot change within the first year of the lease. So you don't have to worry about a rent increase in the middle of your lease term or anything like that. The rent that you start paying as of January 1st will not change until at least January 1st, 2027. As everyone knows, in this area, in Massachusetts, the rents are quite high. So even these affordable rents are high, of course. Just to give you an example, just to give you kind of a idea of what the market rate rents are going for, the one bedrooms at this property are going for between $2,700 and $2,800. The two bedrooms are going for $33,000 to $37,000, and the three bedrooms are going for over $4,000. So there is quite a bit of a discounted price there for the affordable unit, luckily, or thankfully, I should say. So since we know that we hope that there's going to be more interested and eligible applicants than we have available affordable apartments, we have to have the lottery process to make this available to only households who qualify for the affordable housing program. So households with annual incomes up to 80% of the area median income will be eligible for the lottery. So before I move on to eligibility requirements for the program, I covered kind of a lot of logistics and a basic overview of the property. If you have any specific questions on either of those things, so basic questions or a question on the property, just let me know, and I will answer that for you. But for now, the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program, I just want to go over those to give you a sense of whether or not your household would qualify for the units. So there's 4 eligibility requirements. All of this is listed in the information packet. Like I said, the first eligibility requirement is that households have to have qualifying income. So as you can see on your screen, the 80% maximum income limit is listed for a household size of 1 through 6 people. And I'll talk a lot more about that in just a minute. The second eligibility requirement is that priority for units is going to be based on household composition. So for example, if you are a 1-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally considered what the program considers a type 1 household. So you can apply for a 2-bedroom unit in this lottery, but larger type 2 or 3 households are going to be placed ahead of you on that 2-bedroom waiting list after the lottery. Some examples of a type 2 or 3 household would be households with 3 or 4 people, or some 2-person households. The breakdowns are listed for you on both the application and in the information packet, so you'll have a better sense of what your household type is, and we'll confirm that for you after reviewing your application. The third eligibility criteria is that you cannot own a home. Applicants can't own a home upon moving in or at your program certification, I should say. So if you own a home now, it would need to be sold prior to completing your program certification after the lottery with SCB Housing. So that step where you're submitting your finances and your information to SCB Housing, you would need to not own your home. You need to be off the deed to be able to lease an affordable apartment at Rivage. And then the fourth eligibility criteria doesn't come up very often, but applicants can't have financial interest in the property or be considered a related party. That's what the program calls a related party. So that would mean if you work for the developer or the management company, you wouldn't be eligible for this opportunity. So those are the 4 general eligibility requirements. To circle back on the income limits, the affordable units, like I said, are being made available to rent at lower prices than identical or very similar apartments within the building. So a reminder too that you do not need to submit income verification at the time of the lottery application, but you will be given a heads up of what information you're going to need. So if you are found to be eligible for the lottery, when we email you your lottery application number, you're going to get a link to a documentation requirements guide, which is a guide that details the types of documentation that we're going to need from you depending on your sources of income. So it's going to say how many pay stubs you're going to need, how many bank statements. All households are required to submit copies of your federal tax returns from the last year. It's going to outline all of that so you're able to be ready when the time comes that you need to submit that information to us. And although we don't need verification now, I do want to give you a basic overview of how we count income. So for this affordable housing program, income is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So that means, including bonuses, overtime. The only exceptions to the income that is counted is any minors, anybody who's under the age of 18 who's working. If you have a 16-year-old working or something like that in your household, we're not going to count their wage income towards your total household income when we're determining your eligibility. Same thing with dependent full-time students. So if you have maybe a college student or something living in your household, only the first $480 of their wages are counted when determining eligibility. So other than that, we do need to count gross income, not net income, so the amount you make before taxes. Obviously, most of us are not taking home the full amount of our salary. Unfortunately, the program does require us to count gross income, not net income. And how we calculate that income isn't the same for everyone because everyone's income circumstances are unique. So some applicants have that steady weekly salary, it's consistent throughout the year, but there are people who are self-employed or who are working seasonally. In those types of circumstances, if you're per diem or seasonal or self-employed, we may need to look further into the past to be able to anticipate what your income will be for the next 12 months. And specifically, if you're self-employed, we're going to need a profit and loss statement from you and supporting documentation for your business. We do have a template for that for you as well. In general, any income that you have been making, we're going to need to assume you're going to continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation from your employer that you're no longer working there, or maybe that overtime is not going to be offered this year. But in general, you want to make sure you're writing down on your application what the total household income is for all members of your household, so we know what we need to verify and that it matches up with your tax returns and all of that. So when you're completing the application too, make sure that you're writing everything in. So not just wage income, but if you have Social Security or child support, unemployment, anything like that coming into the household, pension benefits, and all of that. There is not a minimum, I'm going to go back to this slide because there is not a minimum income set by the Affordable Housing Program. But most management teams, including the team at Rivage, want to be sure that all tenants can afford the rent, of course, whether or not you're renting a affordable apartment or a market apartment. So the management team has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. Those amounts are listed here. So if you're looking to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, the property is going to require that you have a total of $75,000 in total household income to rent that. And then it goes up from there. If you're looking to rent a 2-bedroom, $83,500, and as you can see here. So why I'm saying that the program has no minimum incomes is because it doesn't, but the leasing office, so the management team over at Rivage, has set these amounts, and that's very typical. Almost every property sets a minimum amount. The exception to that is if you have a mobile housing voucher. So if you have Section 8 or MRVP that you plan to use at the property, you can disregard these minimum incomes because they're not going to apply to your household, because obviously the agency that administers your voucher is going to be picking up a portion of your rent. So if you do have a voucher, we always ask that you check in with the agency that administers your voucher, your housing authority, to confirm that the rents are within your program's payment standards or the max rents from the program. Because obviously you don't want to apply and then get picked in the lottery and not be able to rent there because of the voucher restrictions. But applicants without a voucher, you're going to want your income to be between these minimum income amounts. If you have liquid assets, like a lot of money in your bank account, for example, the leasing office may take that into consideration. So if you're a one-person household, you're looking to rent a one-bedroom, you make $72,000 or $74,000, you're not quite at the $75,000 mark here, but you have $10,000 in the bank, you may be able to rent there. It's going to be the leasing office's decision as to whether or not you meet their leasing criteria for income. So just keep that in mind. Assets. There is no asset limit for affordable rental opportunities. So maybe you have a significant amount of assets in the bank. Maybe you're retired. That's fine. You can still qualify for the program. We are still going to need to collect information relating to your assets, although there is no asset limit. So we are going to ask for bank statements and 401k statements and things like that. And that's because any income generated by your assets count towards your total household income. So when you're writing down on your application, when you're reporting what your assets are, make sure that you're putting, all your bank accounts, but then also any net cash value of your 401k, even your Venmo is considered an asset. Just write all that down there. The lottery itself. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in this opportunity, we encourage you to get your application in. Want to mention too, if you are interested in more than one unit size, like if you're interested in a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, you want to indicate that on your application. If you think you're interested in both, there's no downside to doing that, but there is potential downside if you apply for only one unit size and then later decide you're interested in another apartment. So if you apply for only a 2-bedroom, but you would have potentially been interested in a 3-bedroom, you're going to be, and you decide that later, you are going to be behind a bunch of people who applied for a 3-bedroom in the lottery. So just make sure you indicate whatever, 1, 2, or 3 apartment sizes that you are interested in. All right, so if you're found eligible for the lottery after we review your lottery application, you're going to be sent an email, like I said, with your lottery application number. That's going to be in the form of a series of numbers. So that is just an anonymous identifier. It's going to be the number that is drawn in the lottery because we're not going to be calling names during the lottery. So it's not a ranking of any sort. It just corresponds to the order in which we approved your application. So if you were the very first person to submit a completed application for Rivage, you're going to have the lottery application number of A.001, and then it goes up from there. That email that you receive with your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm whether or not you reported that you were a resident of Acton or that you had a household member working full-time within the town, because you would qualify for a local preference if that were the case. You don't need to supply supporting documentation at that point to confirm that you're living in Acton, but you might, or if you are one of the top households later on in the process, you are going to need to submit verification that you're living in, working in, or have a student in Acton Public Schools. Because some of the units at Rivage have local preference, which means that local preference households will have priority for those units over non-local preference households of the same size in the lottery. So that's indicated in the, or it's kind of mapped out for you in the info packet. So take a look at the waiting list in the info packet, and it kind of gives you the hierarchy of the waiting list. And you can see, and again, we don't know how many people from Acton are going to apply for this lottery, so it's unclear how much of an impact that will have on some of the waiting list. Also, in the email that you receive with your lottery application number, it's going to confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, as well as whether or not you needed a disabled accessible unit. So make sure that you're reviewing that email and confirming that everything looks accurate compared to what you submitted in your lottery application. If anything looks incorrect to you, please let us know so we do not do the lottery with your household in the incorrect, assigned to the incorrect waiting list. And if you're found to be ineligible at any point, if you're found to be over income, for example, you're going to be informed by email, and we encourage you to contact us with any questions on the denial. It's possible, sometimes someone submits a online application and they just had a typo or something and their income was higher than it actually is. And so that stuff happens all the time. Just make sure you're looking at that email to confirm for us if there was a mistake. Because we can always, before the lottery, we can always make that change for you. The lottery drawing itself will take place on November 13th at 6 o'clock. It's very similar to this format in that it's a Zoom meeting. I'll have a screen share. You're able to view the lottery in real time. We use a website called random.org that allows for instantaneous results. And basically that program or that website just randomizes the lottery numbers on the screen. And you can see the drawing results that will then need to be sorted onto the waiting list. So you don't know during the lottery session where you fall on the waiting list, but you can see the results of the lottery, and then the waiting list will be sent to you later on that evening with the final results. And during the lottery, every lottery number is drawn. So sometimes you think of lotteries, you think, okay, there's 58 apartments, there's going to be 58 people picked, but that is not the way that these lotteries work. Because the purpose of the lottery is to establish an order on the waiting list. So in general, it is going to be more beneficial for you to be called early in the lottery, to have your number sorted early in the lottery results, but it might not be the deciding factor on whether or not you are high up on the waiting list, since we need to sort the results by the priorities. So for example, if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, and they applied for only a 2-bedroom apartment, they're still going to be behind all type 2 households on that 2-bedroom waiting list. And there's also households who apply for the lottery and then they are either found to be ineligible by the leasing office, or maybe they decide to not rent the apartment after all, they found somewhere else. So if your number is drawn later in the lottery, or if you're further down the waiting list than you would like, that doesn't mean that you won't be moving forward in the process. It just means that the households ahead of you on the waiting list will need to drop off somehow before you are invited forward to the next step in the process. So as I mentioned, after the lottery, we'll then populate the waiting list, taking local preference into consideration and whether or not your household requires that disabled accessible apartment. And we'll do our best. The waiting lists are normally sent to you that same evening, and you'll be able to see at that point where your lottery application number fell on the waiting list, and you'll have a better idea as to whether or not you're going to be invited forward to the next step in the process, which is to apply for the lease screening with the leasing office. So you will hear from the leasing office, or you'll be asked to contact them within about 5 days of receiving the waiting list. So once you see that you are highlighted as one of the top households on the waiting list, you're going to connect with the management team, and they'll have your contact information as well, and you can initiate the lease screening. And just a reminder again that SCB Housing screens for lottery and your program eligibility, but the leasing eligibility is with the management team over at Rivage. So their screening is probably going to include, credit check, rental history check, background check to determine if you're eligible to rent with them. And then you want to be aware too that the leasing office could be inviting more households to complete the lease screening than there are available units. So, if there are, let's see, we've got 6 3-bedrooms available at Rivage, they may be inviting forward more than 6 households to apply for their 3-bedroom apartments because they want to speed up the process as much as possible. And, there's always households who don't qualify in the end. So it makes sense to do that. So if you are lease approved by Rivage, that's the point in the process where being close to the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial, because if you're the top household on the waiting list, you're going to have the first chance to reserve an affordable unit. So if you have the top position on a 1-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the first choice of apartment. So you'll be able to tour the units and make your decision based off of whatever factors are important to you. Maybe you want to be at a certain location within the building, or you want a certain lease date. And then the second household on the waiting list will have second choice in the remaining units, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how the hierarchy of the waiting list works when you know your position. Once you've reserved one of the affordable apartments, you've worked with the leasing office and you have passed their lease screening and you've now reserved one of the apartments after choosing it, the leasing office is going to notify us at SCB Housing so we can coordinate the submission of all of your verifications. So your income information, your asset information, your tax documentation, and we'll be completing your final eligibility review. So hopefully by that point, you've been able to take a look at that documentation requirements guide, and you've started to gather some of the documentation. You'll have about 10 days to get that information into us. And of course, it's a lot of info. We always work with applicants to make sure that they're aware if there's anything missing. You're kind of given a deadline if you have an incomplete application. So no worries if you don't have everything on the first submission to us. Once you are approved, though, once you have everything, SCB Housing has a complete file, we'll notify you, and you will be able to, we'll also notify Rivage, and you'll be able to sign your lease and establish the move-in date. The move-in date doesn't need to be on the first of the month or anything like that. It's usually flexible. So once you're leased and you've done all these screenings, you've done the eligibility screening with SCB Housing and the lease screening with the leasing office, you're done with screenings until your lease renewal date next year. So again, if you move in, January 1st, 2026, sometime 3 months before your lease renewal date, so sometime in the fall of 2026, the leasing office is going to be recertifying your income. So we always just ask that recommend that everybody who has or is living in a affordable apartment kind of make sure that they have easy access to their pay stubs and bank statements and things like that, because you will need it each year to recertify your income with the leasing office. But that's not until before your lease renewal. So at that lease renewal, if your household income has increased and is now above that 80% of area median income, that's fine, because households remain eligible for the affordable rent in the affordable apartment as long as your household income doesn't exceed 140% of that year's area median income. So you'll see these numbers in the information packet, and it varies based on household type. But to give you an example, a household of 2 would qualify for an affordable unit through this lottery if you had an income of $105,850. That same family can make up to $148,190 at the time of their recertification in order to remain eligible to rent the affordable apartment at the affordable price. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there where you can have a raise, or you can get a new job and you would still be eligible for the affordable rent, which is good. So that covers mostly what I wanted to get to from the information packet. Again, if you can find the lottery application on our website. You can find the online application link there, and also a PDF version of it. If you have any questions on anything before the lottery or when you're submitting your lottery application, you can contact us by email or by this phone number as well. But before I let you go, are there any questions for anyone on the call? All right, if not, I'm going to put it back to this first page here just so you can get a better look at the information. So the application deadline is October 28th. This online application will be inactive as of 2 p.m. that day. So we look forward to hearing from you, and have a good night.